Hello, puppy cam. Puppy cam to start the stream. Puppy wants snacks to start the stream. Puppy's a little slobbery. I'm warm. Hello, Sharkies. How's it going? Okay, that's enough snacks, man. Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. How's it going? I am a little warm. Notice anything different? I had no idea what to do for the bingo win that we got, so I figured I'd do a little throwback outfit to our 1 year ago. Slightly over. Well, also 1 year ago, we still would have been wearing this for the Hobbit. The Hobbit outfit makes a return. Puppy. Oh, but that's it. It's Wednesday, my dudes. Oh, with the frog. That said, it is a little warm in here right now, and this is also a little extra warm. Some late dinner due to random complications, and I hope those aren't too bad complications. Nice outfit, thanks. The tie needs straightening. It's all wobbly. There we go. Yeah, I just had a portion of a bowl of pho before the stream, but it arrived a little late, so I only ate a little bit of it. Also, I tend to definitely lose appetite when it's warmer out. So yeah, bingo. If anyone has any other ideas of what I should do for our bingo wins, please feel free to suggest them. I was thinking of doing something else as well, but then lost track of time a little bit. I'm a little sore today. Went to Kung Fu yesterday, and I'm definitely feeling it, especially because last week I was not able to go to Kung Fu, and it's one of those things where if you take any time off, you definitely, suffer for it later. So what are the Sharkies doing for dinner? For their delayed dinner? Is it going to be just whatever you happen to have that you can cobble together type of day? Or do you have a specific plan? Sorry, I'm not really talking. Waiting. Deli pizza. Ooh. Yeah, sometimes, I don't know, sometimes just like something you heat up at home yourself for pizza can just be better. We've had bad luck with where we live with getting decent pizza. I don't know what it is. I am. it's not a priority in any sense, but just I'm hoping that wherever we end up moving to has better pizza places. It's a little tricky because sometimes we'll find somewhere that has okay pizza, but they either don't have a gluten-free option or their gluten-free option is bad, and Farmhouse is gluten-free, so that tends to rule out those places. And then it seems like the places that do have decent gluten-free crusts are just, I don't know, unreliable, or their pizza just something's off about it or doesn't taste good. So it's a weird juggling act of just an extra requirement, I guess. Lots of ice in my drink today. It is a warm one out. Got up to like 33 degrees today. I think it's starting to cool off now a little. 7 o'clock. Let's see what the temperature looks like right now here. Yeah, it says it's down to 27 now, which is still quite warm. But not as bad as it was. Are the Sharkies pro ham and pineapple pizza or against? Books, Brews, and Booze, hey! Looking pretty dapper, thank you. This was my outfit that I wore when we were doing The Hobbit, our first stream. This was kind of my Hobbit outfit. And we finally got a bingo on the bingo sheet, so I decided to do a bit of a throwback stream as a celebration for that. How are you doing? Me and Ed's pizza. I have never actually had Me and Ed's, but it always annoys Farmhouse when we see the title because Me and Ed's feels grammatically incorrect. The title, the name. I'm guessing this is going to be a stream where Farmhouse doesn't respond too frequently due to being in a bit of pain. So what's new with B-Bab? B-B-Bab? B-Bab? Yeah, it should just be B-Bab. B-B-A-B. Oh, puppy on lap. We are on the final chapter today of Magician's Gambit. We have very little left to go. Like 12 pages? You love B-Bab? B-B-A-B. Every time I say B-B-A-B, it makes me think of the, like... What was it? It was P-P-A-P? The pen, pineapple, apple pen? Cats fed already? Oh, they're early today. Usually you start feeding the cats after you join us. Everyone's happy, that's good. Bebab. Bebab is cool. So yeah, one chapter to go. Our heroes are infiltrating Ctuchik's lair in Cthulhu. It is Cthulhu, right? Stormy got fed early as well. Today's just an early food day for the cats. We've got a we've got like a Google Home system set up in our place, which in the past when I had the voice control light set up here, you've probably seen me change the lights with that. But we've just got it set up so that at Binabik's dinner time, or Binadin as it is known, we get a reminder that plays, because prior to that, he would start getting impatient like an hour before his dinner time. We try to keep his dinner consistent, but so it would be like his dinner's at 5:30, and at 4:30 he'd come over and start like poking at us and looking at us and going to the kitchen and coming back and being like, "Hey, I'm hungry." So we set up this reminder, and within the week, he stopped that behavior entirely. He just, once he hears the reminder, he bolts from the kitchen. He can be in a dead sleep, but he hears, this reminder come up, which says like, "I've got a reminder for Farmhouse," and it plays a little note, and just when it starts playing the note first, it goes, like do 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 sort of thing. Just at the first hint of that note, he bolts for the kitchen. But he no longer at all like tries to pester us ahead of time. So it worked out quite well for us. Oh, Rak Cthul. We're not in Cthul Mishrak. We're in Rak Cthul. Silly me. Rak Cthul within the territory, province, whatever, of Cthul Murgos. Kingdom, I guess. Last look at the map, I guess, because we're going to be finishing this this book real soon. I've got my fingers on part of it. This camera is so much better at focusing on these maps. It tends, I notice, to like blur and refocus a couple of times, and it'll do that occasionally, but I feel like that's a fair price to pay for being able to take the map away and have it refocus on me like that. Ooh! No longer have to sit here going like this at you guys in 3D. Well, it's quarter after 7, so what do you think? Actually, are both of the Sharkies present? Should I stall for a little bit? Should we talk about something else before I get into the final chapter? You never get tired of maps. You should see my other room. In our other room, where we had planned to set up our gaming table. Now our gaming table's sitting in the garage because we're moving. We've just got a wall covered in framed fantasy maps. So we've got like a map of Ankh-Morpork from Discworld, and we've got a Skyrim map, and I think we've got a couple of different Legend of Zelda maps. We've got the map of Creation from the game Exalted. We've got the Avatar: The Last Airbender world map. We've got the map of Gaia from Final Fantasy VII, just the world of Final Fantasy VII. Go on a tour. I gotta figure out how I would actually get a camera over there. I think easier would just be for me to like take a picture, but my cameras are all, tied to my computer through USB cables, which are not that long. You always check out the map as you're reading Lord of the Rings. Yeah, it's fun to have a visual reference, and I think for some people that also just works a lot better to have something kind of to show progress for movement. And since Lord of the Rings is definitely one of these traveling stories, it's interesting how many, I feel like for fantasy novels, it is much more common for it to be a group of characters that are traveling from one place to the next. And, part of the fantasy comes from seeing different fantastical locales and encountering new things. Versus, you don't get very many fantasy novels that stay in one place for too long. I can think of a few. The Imager saga by Ellie Modestet, I think. No, is that right? That doesn't seem right. Let me just check the author for that. Imager portfolio, and yeah, it is Ellie Modestet Jr. Okay, yeah, the Imager portfolio largely operates out of a single city, with some traveling from that city, but then back to it. And that one, it's less about the worlds, the world itself being fantastical, and more about sort of the political events and the use of magic and things like that in that world. And that is interesting because it allows you somewhat to kind of become very familiar with a single location, like a city or something like that, when books are written in that fashion. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you have a preference for one over the other? The traveling is nice, right? It's fun to have books like Lord of the Rings and the Belgariad and whatever, where they're going from place to place because, you see different places, sort of, right? You experience different cultures and different creatures and things like that, There's always going to be, in books that have elves, you've always got to visit the elven forest where there's at least one really big tree. Because, as we discussed when we were reading... Which book was it? Was it in The Hobbit? No, there wasn't really one big tree in The Hobbit, was there? Which book had the big tree? I'm going to look at the list of books we've read. So we read The Hobbit. Magician's Gambit, Guards, Pawn of Prophecy, Queen's Sorcery... Weird Sisters. Must have been... Maybe we just talked about it while we were reading one of these other books. Because I don't remember any of those in particular having one particularly large tree, but it is a fantasy staple. Oh, was it the Dryad tree? That could have been it. Yeah, you're probably right. But yeah, if you go to a mystical forest, you got to have a big tree. The bigger the tree, the more fantasy it is. So, that's, I think, definitely a plus for these traveling fantasy. I wonder is there a term for that? For the type of fantasy thing where they're always sort of moving from one location to another? Is there a subgenre that covers that? Travelogue? Cooking journal? for The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Or Traveling Foodie's Guide. Farmos has sent me a picture of our map wall to show y'all. Although this only covers some of the maps. You can't see all of them. Ready, BBAB? Oh, let me turn up the brightness on my phone. So there's some of our maps. Ready? So you can see, let's see. We've got, which side? Here we've got the Avatar, The Last Airbender world map. Underneath that is, it's sort of like a sketchy doodle map of Ankh-Morpork. Oops. I've brought it out specifically and shown it before, but it's got a lot of details, a lot of named things. Beside that, I believe is Creation, maybe? No, maybe not. Which one is that? No, that's, oh, Skyrim. So we got, yeah, this one in the middle here. Blah, there is Skyrim. And then this would be Creation. Creation's a fun world. It's there's a role-playing game that is called Exalted. That's The Witcher? It's not Creation? Jeez. Apparently I'm just getting this wrong. Oh, right. No, for some reason I always swap it in my mind. Yeah. Now I see the Dreaming Sea. Yeah, the Creation one is just off frame. That makes sense because the Creation map is larger. That's The Witcher. Does the world of The Witcher have a name? It must. It must. Northern Realms, maybe? Northern Realms of the whatever world. Excuse me. Yeah. Creation's fun. It's a different system, a role-playing system in the same, tabletop fashion as Dungeons and Dragons, but the default that you play as a sort of type of being known as a solar exalted, and they are very powerful. So whereas in Dungeons and Dragons, you start off at level 1 and you're a step above a peasant with a pointy stick if you're playing a fighter, right? Or if you're a wizard, you've got like a couple of level 1 spells and some cantrips. You can make some sparkly lights and do a little bit of damage. But as a solar exalted, you basically start off as kind of a demigod and just work your way up in power from there. So it's interesting in that you are playing as a very powerful being who, whatever you decide to specialize in, you can most probably become the most powerful in that specialty in the world if you survive long enough. And it's fun because there's a lot of support for not just combat but also social things, right? You could be a Dawn cast melee supernal solar exalted, which means you're going to be the best sword fighter the world's ever seen, but you could also be a Twilight cast linguistics supernal who focuses on calligraphy and be very tricky and dangerous with that. So there's, I don't know, it's fun in that regard where you can be like, yes, I want to focus on riding. You know, I want to be the best mounted combatant, or the fastest, or sailing. You know, I want to be the admiral of a fleet of 1,000 ships and be able to connect with every single one of them through my magic. And maybe, you know, cause my ship to be able to fly once I get strong enough. And everyone who steps foot on my ship must submit to my rule. There's a lot of fun stuff in that game. But also it's easy to, I don't know, decision paralysis. Part of it is like, yes, you're very strong, but what are you going to do with that strength? You know? Sure, you can enslave an entire enemy army under your will if you want to, but then what? Now you've got this whole army. What are you going to do with them? It's also, it doesn't use the full set of dice like Dungeons and Dragons does. It only uses 10-sided dice, but you will frequently use like fistfuls of 10-sided dice. You know, once you start earning all of your magics and things, you'll need to roll a lot of dice, especially in some of the fights. The camera's doing that flickering thing like crazy. I really need to figure that out. Alright, I think I should probably start in on the final chapter of Magician's Gambit. Mrs. has returned. Look at that timing. Do the two of you need some time to get dinner going, or should I start reading? Because I can delay a little bit, and all good? Alright, let's do it then. Let's get to the final chapter of Magician's Gambit. Chapter 27, page 293 out of 305. We have 12 pages to go. Ready? So, I guess slight recap, but we infiltrated the Black Temple. I see. In not Cthul Mishrak, in Rak Cthul. The Black Temple in Rak Cthul, or the Dark Temple. Assassinated some Murgos and took their robes and snuck into the temple itself. Bluff checked our way into what's his name? I've been saying it constantly. Ctuchik's lair, and that's where we're at, basically, infiltrating Ctuchik's lair. Belgarath has just left behind, I believe, Barak and Mandaralin as guards at the entrance to Ctuchik's lair, and we are sneaking in. Ctuchik's lair was sort of a spire hanging out of the bottom of Rak Cthul, so it's sort of like a, I don't know if it like comes out the bottom and then curves and like sticks back up or something like that, like if it's like a hook, or if it just hangs straight down. Yeah. So going in, we've got Belgarath, Polgara, Silk, Garion, and Relg. I believe it's just those 5 entering in. Ragged World is raiding with a party of 7. Ragged Raid. I see. Welcome, everyone. Hey, how's it going? Is Farmo saying raid 3 times and spelling it right once? Sarcasm and Shots, hello, welcome. What else did I see here? Fail Fishu. Bebab saying, hello, it's been ages since you've seen me. Yeah, it's been a little while. How's it going, everyone? What's that? Info X Czar. What were we all doing over on Ragged World's channel? Uh, raid. Hey, thanks for the raid. I feel like I better summon the puppy since everyone that shows up here for the first time needs to meet Binabik. There he is. Puppy cam, I'm going to move the camera a little bit. Whoa, sorry about the shaky cam. Here's the puppy. This is Binabik. You're reading a comic. Cool. This is Binakekabinik. He's a very good boy. 1950 Hell Meets Murder. Hey? Good puppy. '50s comics. Cool. Very cool. Alright, sorry about the shaky camera. Let me get it sorted back out. We are just reading, we're just about to start the 1950s comics, usually horror, and they're quite cheesy, so it makes things fun. I think the oldest comics I've really read are the, initial run of Spider-Man, and that's, 60s. I don't think I've read anything comic-wise as old as, Hey, Robakio's here! Did you miss the end of the bingo? We did get a line on our bingo sheet, which is why I'm wearing my Hobbit outfit. We got O down, which was Grim, which really should have been our free space, it turns out. Pyro Dernic, Sinedro weirdly watching Garion, anyone crying, and Silk being a D&D rogue. The first Hobbit, yeah, the first book that I read on this stream, which was a little bit over a year ago, was The Hobbit. And so this was the outfit that I wore while reading that. It was my most Hobbitish outfit I could find put together. You missed Angst, though? You're going to use your channel points to unlock Angst? I'm sure there will be more Angst to come. Sharky saying, fun random fact, until about 4 or 5 years ago, it was illegal in Canada to sell or otherwise provide any comic that depicted a crime. So, all of them just about. So was that just like one of those laws that never got enforced, I wonder? B-Bab recommended me. It is a Hobbitish outfit. Appreciate that. And thank you, Books, Brews, and Booze, B-Bab. Thanks for bringing the raid my way. I appreciate it. It was one of those so-called zombie laws that got repealed in a group. That makes sense. Sharkies aren't much of a troll, usually. Not in any kind of misinformation kind of way. Oh yeah, I will absolutely give Ragged World a follow. And yes, I am also located in Canada. I'm near Vancouver. I suppose I should introduce myself. I'm Sleet. Hi. Thanks all for joining me. So for as far as what my plan is here, we're going to finish this book off. We've got one chapter to go. And then we're going to figure out what to read next. I don't know if we'll figure that out tonight or on Friday, because I'm here usually. I'm almost always here Wednesdays and Fridays, 7 p.m. Pacific time is when I start. We usually read a couple of chapters at least. One or two, depending on the length of the book. Maybe someone was criminalized for it half a century ago. In these comics, the actual devil appeared in wrestling regalia and committed triple homicide with a spiked bat. So that would count as a crime. Yeah? I suppose so. I think in most countries of the world, triple homicide. And the devil looked like Waluigi. Wah! Or Waluigi looks like the devil. That's why people love Waluigi so much, right? With a chiseled chin. That's pretty great. Yeah, this evening, finishing this book. So I'm going to get to it. We are on the last chapter. We are inside the lair of someone very evil. I don't think there's too much in terms of content warnings for this chapter. I think there'll be some unpleasant activities hinted at or alluded to, but I don't think we're going to see anything too gory or grim in here. Grim. We're definitely going to see grim. That was one of our first bingo sheet marks up in the top corner there. Grim. Against water skiing at night. Yeah, I honestly, I think people should probably avoid water skiing at night. It just seems kind of dangerous. Okay, finally we can duel while water skiing at night after reading some comics about crimes. I don't know if I could multitask that well. I think I'm losing that duel. I assume that falling off of your water skis counts as a loss in a water skiing duel. Okay, alright, I'm going to start reading. Chapter 27, page 293. The wealth of empires lay beyond the black door. Bright yellow coins, gold beyond counting, lay in heaps on the floor. Carelessly scattered among the coins were rings, bracelets, chains, and crowns, gleaming richly. Blood-red bars from the mines of Angarak stood in stacks along the wall, interspersed here and there by open chests filled to overflowing with fist-sized diamonds that glittered like ice. A large table sat in the center of the room, littered with rubies, sapphires, and emeralds as big as eggs. Ropes and strings of pearls, pink, rosy gray, even some of jet, held back the deep crimson drapes that billowed heavily before the windows. Belgarath moved like a stalking animal, showing no sign of his age, his eyes everywhere. He ignored the riches around him and crossed the deep carpeted floor to a room filled with learning, where tightly rolled scrolls lay in racks reaching to the ceiling, and the leather backs of books marched like battalions along dark wooden shelves. The tables in the second room were covered with the curious glass apparatus of chemical experiment and strange machines of brass and iron, all cogs and wheels and pulleys and chains. Touch nothing but the lamp! In yet a third chamber stood a massive gold throne, backed by drapes of black velvet. An ermine cape lay across one arm of the throne, and a scepter and a heavy gold crown lay upon the seat. Inlaid in the polished stones of the floor was a map that depicted, so far as Garion could tell, the entire world. "What sort of place is this?" Dernick whispered in awe. See Farmos plugging something. Ctuchik amuses himself here, Aunt Pole replied with an expression of repugnance. He has many vices, and he likes to keep each one separate.
He's not down here, Belgarath muttered. Let's go up to the next level.
He led them back the way they had come, and started up a flight of stone steps that curved along the rounded wall of the turret. Started up. So I'm guessing then, because this turret, whatever, was described as hanging down, so I'm guessing it must hook upwards if he's going upstairs. Because they definitely, yeah, they would have started. Yeah, I'm not sure. Either that or that's just a weird oversight. The room at the top of the stairs was filled with horror. A rack stood in the center of it, and whips and flails hung on the walls. Cruel implements of gleaming steel lay in orderly rows on a table near the wall. Hooks, needle-pointed spikes, and dreadful things with saw edges that still had bits of bone and flesh caught between their teeth. The entire room reeked of blood. You and Silk go ahead, Father, Aunt Pole said. There are things in the other rooms on this level that Garion, Dernick, and Relg shouldn't see. Thanks, Farmhouse. Yes. All of my streams here I end up putting on up on YouTube after. So if you just search the same name, Sleet Reads, if you want to catch up on anything I've done in the past, it's all on there. Thanks for the follow, Ragged World. Belgarath nodded and went through a doorway with Silk behind him. After a few moments, they returned by way of another door. Silk's face looked slightly sick. He has some rather exotic perversions, doesn't he? He remarked with a shudder. Belgarath's face was bleak.
We go up again, he said quietly. He's on the top level. I thought he might be, but I needed to be sure.
They mounted another stairway. As they neared the top, Garion felt a peculiar tingling glow beginning somewhere deep within him, and a sort of endless singing seemed to draw him on. The mark on the palm of his right hand burned. A black stone altar stood in the first room on the top level of the turret, and the steel image of the face of Torak brooded from the wall behind it. I don't think it's the spirit of Christmas. But B-Bab seems to disagree. A gleaming knife, its hilt crusted with dried blood, lay on the altar, and bloodstains had sunk into the very pores of the rock. Belgarath was moving quickly now, his face intent and his stride cat-like. He glanced through one door in the wall beyond the altar, shook his head, and moved on to a closed door in the far wall. He touched his fingers lightly to the wood, then nodded.
He's in here,
he murmured with satisfaction. He drew in a deep breath and grinned suddenly.
I've been waiting for this for a long time, he said.
Don't dawdle, Father, Aunt Pole told him impatiently. Her eyes were steely, and the white lock at her brow glittered like frost.
I want you to stay out of it when we get inside, Pole, he reminded her. You too, Garion. This is between Ctuchik and me.
All right, Father, Aunt Pole replied. Belgarath put out his hand and opened the door. The room beyond was plain, even bare. The stone floor was uncarpeted, and the round windows looking out into the darkness were undraped. Okay, Sharkies, maybe you're right. Simple candles burned in sconces on the walls, and a plain table stood in the center of the room. Seated at the table, with his back to the door, sat a man in a hooded black robe, who seemed to be gazing into an iron cask. Garion felt his entire body throbbing in response to what was in the cask, and the singing in his mind filled him. A little boy with pale blonde hair stood in front of the table, and he was also staring at the cask. He wore a smudged linen smock and dirty little shoes. Though his expression seemed devoid of all thought, there was a sweet innocence about him that caught at the heart. His eyes were blue, large, and trusting, and he was quite the most beautiful child Garion had ever seen.
What took you so long, Belgarath?
The man at the table asked, not even bothering to turn around. His voice sounded dusty. He closed the iron box with a faint click.
I was almost beginning to worry about you. A few minor delays, Ctuchik,
Belgarath replied.
I hope we didn't keep you waiting too long. I managed to keep myself occupied. Come in, all of you.
Ctuchik turned to look at them. His hair and beard were a yellowed white. And were very long. His face was deeply lined, and his eyes glittered in their sockets. It was a face filled with an ancient and profound evil. Cruelty and arrogance had eroded all traces of decency or humanity from it, and a towering egotism had twisted it into a perpetual sneer of contempt for every other living thing. His eyes shifted to Aunt Pole.
Polgara,
he greeted her with a mocking inclination of his head.
You're as lovely as ever. Have you come finally, then, to submit yourself to the will of my master?
His leer was vile. No, Ctuchik, she replied coldly. I came to see justice.
Justice?
He laughed scornfully.
There's no such thing, Polgara. The strong do what they like. The weak submit. My master taught me that.
I could picture Ctuchik being like claymation here, or like rotoscoped. Don Bluth, oh boy. Gotta have the cowled hood and the glittering eyes in the dark.
My master taught me that.
And his maimed face did not teach you otherwise? Yeah. The high priest's face darkened briefly, but he shrugged off his momentary irritation.
I'd offer you all a place to sit and some refreshment, perhaps,
he continued in that same dusty voice.
But You won't be staying that long, I'm afraid.
He glanced at the rest of them, his eyes noting each in turn.
Your party seems diminished, Belgarath, he observed. I hope you haven't lost any of them along the way. They're all well, Ctuchik, Belgarath assured him. I'm certain that they'll appreciate your concern, however. All? Ctuchik drawled. I see the nimble thief, and the man with 2 lives, and the blind man, but I don't see the others. Where's the dreadful bear, and the knight protector, the horse lord, and the bowman, and the ladies? Where are they? The queen of the world, and the mother of the race that died.
Oh. I think that's the first time we've heard maybe that last name. Also, this might be the first time we've heard reference to the bowmen. Yeah, Lil Doran.
All well, Ctuchik,
Belgarath replied.
All well. How extraordinary. I was almost certain that you'd have lost 1 or 2 at least by now. I admire your dedication, old man. To keep intact for all these centuries a prophecy that would have collapsed if one single ancestor had died at the wrong time.
His eyes grew distant momentarily.
Ah,
he said.
I see. You left them below to stand guard. You didn't have to do that, Belgarath. I left orders that we weren't to be disturbed.
The high priest's eyes stopped then on Garion's face.
Belgarion,
he said almost politely. Despite the singing that still thrilled in his veins, Garion felt a chill as the evil force of the high priest's mind touched him.
You're younger than I expected.
Garion stared defiantly at him, gathering his will to ward off any surprise move by the old man at the table.
Would you pit your will against mine, Belgarion?
Ctuchik seemed amused.
You burned Chamdar, but he was a fool. You'll find me a bit more difficult. Tell me, boy, did you enjoy it?
No, Garion replied, still holding himself ready.
In time, you'll learn to enjoy it,
Ctuchik said with an evil grin.
Watching your enemy writhe and shriek in your mind's grip is one of the more satisfying rewards of power.
He turned his eyes back to Belgarath.
And so you've come at last to destroy me?
He said mockingly.
If it comes down to that, yes. It's been a long time coming, Ctuchik. Hasn't it, though? We're very much alike, Belgarath. I've been looking forward to this meeting almost as much as you have. Yes, we're very much alike. Under different circumstances, we might even have been friends. I doubt that. I'm a simple man, and some of your amusements are a bit sophisticated for my taste. Spare me that, please. You know as well as I do that we're both beyond all restriction. Perhaps, but I prefer to choose my friends a bit more carefully.
That's a cliché. Under different circumstances, we might even have been friends.
You're growing tiresome, Belgarath. Tell the others to come up.
Ctuchik raised one eyebrow sardonically.
Don't you want to have them watch while you destroy me? Think of how sweet their admiration will be. They're fine just where they are,
Belgarath told him.
Don't be tedious. Surely you're not going to deny me the opportunity to pay homage to the Queen of the World.
Ctuchik's voice was mocking.
I yearn to behold her exquisite perfection before you kill me. I doubt that she'd care much for you, Ctuchik. I'll convey your respects, however. I insist, Belgarath. It's a small request, easily granted. If you don't summon her, I will.
Belgarath's eyes narrowed, and then he suddenly grinned.
So, that's it,
he said softly.
I wondered why you'd gone to all the trouble to let us get through so easily. It doesn't really matter now, you know,
Ctuchik almost purred.
You've made your last mistake, old man. You've brought her to Rakthul, and that's all I really needed. Your prophecy dies here and now, Belgarath, and you with it, I'd imagine.
The high priest's eyes flashed triumphantly, and Garion felt the evil force of Ctuchik's mind reaching out, searching with a terrible purpose. Belgarath exchanged a quick look with Aunt Pole and slyly winked. Ctuchik's eyes widened suddenly as his mind swept through the lower levels of his grim turret and found it empty. His grim turret! And found it empty.
Where is she?
He demanded wildly, in a voice that was almost a scream.
The princess wasn't able to come with us,
Belgarath replied blandly.
She sends her apologies, though. You're lying, Belgarath! You wouldn't have dared to leave her behind. There's no place in the world where she'd be safe. Not even in the caves of Ulgo?
Ctuchik's face blanched.
Ulgo?
He gasped.
Poor old Ctuchik,
Belgarath said, shaking his head in mock regret.
You're slipping badly, I'm afraid. It wasn't a bad plan you had, but didn't it occur to you to make sure that the princess was actually with us before you let me get this close to you? One of the others will do just as well,
Ctuchik asserted, his eyes blazing with fury.
No,
Belgarath disagreed.
The others are all unassailable. Sinedra's the only vulnerable one, and she's at Prolgu, under the protection of Ul himself. You can attempt that if you'd like, but I wouldn't really advise it. Curse you, Belgarath! Why don't you just give me the orb now, Ctuchik?
Belgarath suggested.
You know I can take it away from you if I have to.
Sharkies wonder what Garion thinks of the reference to Sinedra as Queen of the World. I mean, not all of the other ones are so outlandish, right? The Knight Protector's pretty obvious, the Bowman's pretty obvious. But some of them are definitely at least a little, I don't know, obscure, right? The Man with Two Lives. Well, now we've got, I guess, the mother of the queen, the mother of the race that died. Was that what it was? We can work that one out pretty easily. Ctuchik struggled to gain control of himself.
Let's not be hasty, Belgarath,
He said after a moment.
What are we going to gain by destroying each other? We have Cthrag Yaska in our possession. We could divide the world between us.
In case you've forgotten, Cthrag Yaska is what the Murgos, the Angaraks, call the orb. I think what Torak called the orb.
I don't want half the world, Ctuchik. You want it all for yourself?
A brief, knowing smile crossed Ctuchik's face.
So did I at first, but I'll settle for half. Actually, I don't want any of it.
Ctuchik's expression became a bit desperate.
What do you want, Belgarath? The orb,
Belgarath replied inexorably.
Give it to me, Ctuchik. Why don't we join forces and use the orb to destroy Zedar? Why? You hate him as much as I do. He betrayed your master. He stole Cthrag Yaska from you.
The kind of antagonist that doesn't understand someone who doesn't want power. Yeah. The kind of antagonist who thinks that's the only thing that anyone wants.
He betrayed himself, Ctuchik, and I think that haunts him sometimes. His plan to steal the orb was clever, though.
Belgarath looked thoughtfully at the little boy standing in front of the table, his large eyes fixed on the iron cask.
I wonder where he found this child,
he mused.
Innocence and purity are not exactly the same thing, of course, but they're very close. It must have cost Zedar a great deal of effort to raise a total innocent. Think of all the impulses he had to suppress. That's why I let him do it,
Ctuchik said. The little blond boy, seeming to know that they were discussing him, looked at the two old men, his eyes filled with absolute trust.
The whole point is that I still have Cthrag Yaska, the orb,
Ctuchik said, leaning back in his chair and laying one hand on the cask.
If you try to take it, I'll fight you. Neither of us knows for sure how that would turn out. Why take chances? What good is it doing you? Even if it would submit to you, what then? Would you raise Torak and surrender it to him? I might think about it, but Torak's been asleep for 5 centuries now, and the world's run fairly well without him. I don't imagine there's all that much point in disturbing him just yet. Which would leave you in possession of the orb.
Ctuchik shrugged.
Someone has to have it. Why not me?
He was still leaning back in his chair, seeming almost completely at ease. There was no warning movement, or even a flicker of emotion across his face as he struck. It came so quickly that it was not a surge, but a blow, and the sound of it was not the now familiar roaring in his mind, but a thunderclap. Sorry, everyone, this one wasn't a Hank. Garion knew that, had it been directed at him, it would have destroyed him. But it was not directed at him. It lashed instead at Belgarath. For a dreadful instant, Garion saw his grandfather engulfed in a shadow blacker than night itself. Then, the shadow shattered like a goblet of delicate crystal, scattering shards of darkness as it blew apart. Now grim-faced, Belgarath still faced his ancient enemy.
"Is that the best you can do, Ctuchik?"
he asked, even as his own will struck. BBAB had a hankering. Sharky say me, maybe even a honk. Nice. Even as his own will struck. A searing blue light suddenly surrounded the Grolim, closing in upon him, seeming to crush him with its intensity. The stout chair upon which he sat burst into chunks and splinters, as if a sudden vast weight had settled down upon it. Ctuchik fell among the fragments of his chair and pushed back the blue incandescence with both hands. He lurched to his feet and answered with flames. For a dreadful instant, Garion remembered Asherak, burning in the wood of the Dryads. But Belgarath brushed the fire away, and, despite his once-stated assertion that the will and word needed no gesture, he raised his hand and smashed at Ctuchik with lightning. Wizard battle. The sorcerer and the magician faced each other in the center of the room, surrounded by blazing lights and waves of flame and darkness. Flame and darkness. Garion's mind grew numb under the repeated detonations of raw energy as the two struggled. He sensed that their battle was only partially visible, and that blows were being struck which he could not see, could not even imagine. The air in the turret room seemed to crackle and hiss. Sharky say hand gestures not necessary, but more dramatic. They help you focus a little, maybe. Magician and wizard? No, magician and sorcerer. Belgarath has said before that calling someone a magician is a deadly insult in their circles. So he refers to Ctuchik as a magician. Strange images appeared and vanished, flickering at the extreme limits of visibility. Vast faces, enormous hands, and things Garion could not name. The turret itself trembled as the two dreadful old men ripped open the fabric of reality itself to grasp weapons of imagination or delusion. Without even thinking, Garion began to gather his will, drawing his mind into focus. He had to stop it. The edges of their blows were smashing at him and the others. Beyond thought now, Belgarath and Ctuchik, consumed with their hatred for each other, were unleashing forces that could kill them all. "Garion, stay out of it!" Aunt Pole told him in a voice so harsh that he could not believe it was hers. "They're at the limit. If you throw anything else into it, you'll destroy them both." She gestured sharply to the others. "Get back, all of you! The air around them is alive." Fearfully, they all backed toward the rear wall of the turret room. The sorcerer and the magician stood no more than a few feet apart now, their eyes blazing and their power surging back and forth in waves. The air sizzled around them, and their robes smoked. Then Garion's eyes fell upon the little boy. He stood watching with calm, uncomprehending eyes. He neither started nor flinched at the dreadful sounds and sights that crashed around him. Garion tensed himself to dash forward and yank the child to safety. But at that moment, the little boy turned toward the table. Quite calmly, he walked through a sudden wall of green flame that shot up in front of him. Either he did not see the fire, or he did not fear it. He reached the table, stood on his tiptoes, and, raising the lid, He put his hand into the iron cask over which Ctuchik had been gloating. He lifted a round, polished, gray stone out of the cask. Geryon instantly felt that strange tingling glow again, so strong now that it was almost overwhelming, and his ears filled with the haunting song. He heard Aunt Pole gasp. Holding the gray stone in both hands like a ball, the little boy turned and walked directly toward Geryon, his eyes filled with trust and the expression on his small face confident. The polished stone reflected the flashing lights of the terrible conflict raging in the center of the room, but there was another light within it as well. Deep within it stood an intense azure glow, a light that neither flickered nor changed, a light that grew steadily stronger as the boy approached Geryon. The child stopped and raised the stone in his hands, offering it to Geryon. He smiled and spoke a single word, "Errand." An instant image filled Geryon's mind, an image of a dreadful fear. He knew that he was looking directly into the mind of Ctuchik. There was a picture in Ctuchik's mind, a picture of Geryon holding the glowing stone in his hand, and that picture terrified the Grolim. Geryon felt waves of fear spilling out toward him. Deliberately, and quite slowly, he reached his right hand toward the stone the child was offering. The mark on his palm yearned toward the stone, and the chorus of song in his mind swelled to a mighty crescendo. Even as he stretched out his hand, he felt the sudden, unthinking, animal panic in Ctuchik. The Grolim's voice was a hoarse shriek. "Be not!" he cried out desperately, directing all his terrible power at the stone in the little boy's hands. For a shocking instant, a deadly silence filled the turret. Even Belgarath's face, drawn by his terrible struggle, was shocked and unbelieving. The blue glow within the heart of the stone seemed to contract. Then it flared again. Ctuchik, his long hair and beard disheveled, stood gaping in wide-eyed and open-mouthed horror. "I didn't mean it!" he howled. "I didn't! But a new and even more stupendous force had already entered the round room. The force flashed no light, nor did it push against Geryon's mind. It seemed instead to pull out, drawing at him as it closed about the horrified Ctuchik. The high priest of the Grolims shrieked mindlessly. Then he seemed to expand, then contract, then expand again. Cracks appeared on his face as if he had suddenly solidified into stone, and the stone was disintegrating under the awful force welling up within him. Within those hideous cracks, Geryon saw, not flesh and blood and bone, but blazing energy. Ctuchik began to glow, brighter and brighter. He raised his hands imploringly. "Help me!" he screamed. He shrieked out a long, despairing, "No!" And then, with a shattering sound that was beyond noise, the disciple of Torak exploded into nothingness. Hurled to the floor by that awesome blast, Geryon tumbled against the wall. Without thinking, he caught the little boy, who was flung against him like a rag doll. The round stone clattered as it bounced against the rocks of the wall. Garion reached out to catch it, but Aunt Pole's hand closed on his wrist. "No," she said. "Don't touch it. It's the orb." Garion's hand froze. The little boy squirmed out of his grasp and ran after the rolling orb. "Errand!" he laughed triumphantly as he caught it. "What happened?" Silk muttered, struggling to his feet and shaking his head. "Ctuchik destroyed himself," Aunt Pole replied, also rising. "He tried to unmake the orb. The Mother of the Gods will not permit unmaking." She looked quickly at Garion. "Help me with your grandfather." Belgarath had been standing almost in the center of the explosion that had destroyed Ctuchik. The blast had thrown him halfway across the room, and he lay in a stunned heap, his eyes glazed and his hair and beard singed. Have we heard of the Mother of the Gods before? I was wondering that myself just now. Maybe. I feel like it might have briefly been mentioned, something similar at least once before. I'm not certain about that. It might have been in this prologue. No, if it was, it probably would have been here. Wait, hang on. No, it doesn't actually mention it here. Would there have been another prologue that was mentioned in? Possibly. If it has been mentioned, there might have been something brief or like kind of obscure, but there also might not have been. So, Belgarath had been standing almost in the center of the explosion that had destroyed Ctuchik. The blast had thrown him halfway across the room, and he lay in a stunned heap, his eyes glazed and his hair and beard singed. "Get up, father," Aunt Pole said urgently, bending over him. The turret began to shudder, and the basalt pinnacle from which it hung swayed. A vast, booming sound echoed up out of the earth. Bits of rock and mortar showered down from the walls of the room as the earth quivered in the aftershock of Ctuchik's destruction. In the rooms below, the stout door banged open, and Garion heard pounding feet.
"Where are you?"
Barak's voice bellowed. "Up here!" Silk shouted down the stairway. Barak and Mandaralin rushed up the stone stairs.
"Get out of here!"
Barak roared.
"The turret's starting to break away from the rock. The temple up there's collapsing, and there's a crack 2 feet wide in the ceiling where the turret joins the rock."
"Father," Aunt Pole said sharply, "you must get up." Belgarath stared at her uncomprehendingly. "Pick him up," she snapped at Barak. There was a dreadful tearing sound as the rocks that held the turret against the side of the peak began to rip away under the pressures of the convulsing earth.
"There!"
Relg said in a ringing voice. He was pointing at the back wall of the turret, where the stones were cracking and shattering.
"Can you open it? There's a cave beyond."
Aunt Pole looked up quickly, focused her eyes on the wall, and pointed one finger. "Burst!" she commanded. The stone wall blew back into the echoing cave, like a wall of straw struck by a hurricane. It's pulling loose, Silk yelled, his voice shrill. He pointed at a widening crack between the turret and the solid face of the peak.
Jump!
Barak shouted.
Hurry!
Silk flung himself across the crack and spun to catch Relg, who had followed him blindly. Dernick and Mandaralin, with Aunt Pole between them, leaped across as the groaning crack yawned wider.
Go, boy!
Barak commanded Geryon. Carrying the still dazed Belgarath, the big Ctuchik was lumbering toward the opening.
The child!
The voice in Geryon's mind crackled, no longer dry or disinterested.
Save the child, or everything that has ever happened is meaningless!
Geryon gasped, suddenly remembering the little boy. He turned and ran back into the slowly toppling turret. He swept up the boy in his arms and ran for the hole Aunt Pole had blown in the rock. Barak jumped across, and his feet scrambled for an awful second on the very edge of the far side. Even as he ran, Geryon pulled in his strength. At the instant he jumped, he pushed back with every ounce of his will. With the little boy in his arms, he literally flew across the awful gap and crashed directly into Barak's broad back. Barak's broad back. Try saying that 10 times fast. The little boy in his arms, with the orb of Aldur cradled protectively against his chest, smiled up at him. "Errand?" he asked. Geryon turned. The turret was leaning far out from the basalt wall, its supporting stones cracking, ripping away from the sheer face. Ponderously, it toppled outward, and then, with the shards and fragments of the Temple of Torak hurtling past it, it sheared free of the wall and fell into the awful gulf beneath. The floor of the cave they had entered was heaving as the earth shuddered and shook, and shock after shock reverberated up through the basalt pinnacle. Huge chunks of the walls of Rak Thul were ripping free and plunging past the cave mouth, flickering down through the red light of the newly risen sun. "Is everybody here?" Silk demanded, looking quickly around. Then, satisfied that they were all safe, he added, "We'd better get back from the opening a bit. This part of the peak doesn't feel all that stable."
Do you want to go down now?
Relg asked Aunt Pole.
Or do you want to wait until the shaking subsides? We'd better move, Barak advised. These caves will be swarming with Murgos as soon as the quake stops.
Aunt Pole glanced at the half-conscious Belgarath, and then seemed to gather herself. "We'll go down," she decided firmly. "We still have to stop to pick up the slave woman." They haven't mentioned They did. They said that Silk, Dernick, and Aunt Pole were going together. Let's see. Silk flung himself across the crack and spun to catch Relg, who had followed him blindly. Dernick and Mandaralin, with Aunt Pole between them, leaped across as the groaning crack yawned wider. So they mentioned him at least when everyone was jumping out of the turret. Yeah, there was a lot happening. "We have to stop to pick up the slave woman."
"She's almost certain to be dead,"
Relg asserted quickly.
"The earthquakes probably brought the roof of that cave down on her."
Aunt Pole's eyes were flinty as she looked him full in the face. No man alive could face that gaze for long. Relg dropped his eyes.
"All right,"
he said sullenly. He turned and led them back into the dark cave, with the earthquake rumbling beneath their feet. Here ends Book 3 of the Belgariad. Book 4, Castle of Wizardry, brings Garion and Sinedra to the first realization of their heritage, as the prophecy moves them toward its fulfillment, and Garion discovers there are powers more difficult than sorcery. She's almost certain to be dead, Relg hoped. Yeah, it's not Relg's brightest moment right there. Ugh. Oh, Relg. Well, we did it. We finished Magician's Gambit. So as we can all tell, I'm sure, what's happening on the cover at this point. They defeated the mini-boss, right? Which I'm assuming that that is Ctuchik right there, not not Belgarath. Hooray! And of course we've got, you know, the silhouette of the steel mask of Torak there. Ctuchik's face is comically surprised. Yeah, that would probably be the moment where he is seeing this right here, right? That is the moment where he is so out of sorts with what's taking place that he breaks the cardinal rule and tries to unmake something. And of all things, he tries to unmake the orb itself. Go big or go home, I guess, right? So we did it. We finished another book. Yay! Thanks everyone for sticking with me through that. The cover illustrations are very 1980s LARPer, yeah. As we've said before, the type of thing that goes on the side of a van. Airbrushed onto the side of a van. And Garion looking like Carrie. We did this before. We mentioned this before when we first looked at this. Carrie Elwes? I don't remember what we determined it was. Wesley. As you wish. I like how during that conflict, yeah, I'm not sure, the boy comes up and offers the orb to Garion. Garion gets an image in his mind of Ctuchik's spear, and so he goes, let's play that up a bit, huh? I'm gonna reach for the orb. Uh-oh, Ctuchik, watch out. You have a copy of The Princess Bride on the shelf? The book or the film? Elwes? Carrie Elwes? Yeah, maybe. You own both. Have you ever read the book? It's one of the few instances... I haven't actually read it myself, but it's one of the few instances where most of the time it seems like people prefer the film to the book. Mrs. has read it. What do you think? Do you agree with that, or are they just different? Mr. has not. I love it's one of the few where the movie edges out the book, yeah. Yeah, that seems to be pretty... B-Bab has read it as well. And what do you think? Do you agree? Especially if you've seen the movie first. That's fair. Frequently, you know, the order in which you encounter things, I think, influences people's preferences. Few changes and the performance adds so much. I love the duel between Inigo Montoya and the Dread Pirate, where they're all just sort of yelling out, you know, I see your whatever. It was not as boring as people made it out to be, but the movie was admittedly just nicely done. Okay. There are a few parts of the book that get a little long-winded. What do they say? They yell out a bunch of things in that fight, but which is interesting because the things they're yelling, because I've done some fencing, and a lot of the stuff they're yelling are the names of like Italian fencing masters and things like that. But the way they yell them out is just like they're just spouting out words. It's like just like kind of like yelling buzzwords almost. Let's see. Westley. All right. Just taking a look at what should hopefully be the script here. Yeah, like here. Naturally, you expect me to attack with Capo Ferro. Capo Ferro is a fencing master. Naturally, but I find that Tybalt cancels Capo Ferro, don't you? Unless the enemy hasn't studied his Agrippa, which I have. Like, these are all just... It just doesn't really make sense, the things that they're saying. They're all words, you know, it's like those certainly all are words. Which, you know, is not a shot at the movie. I think it's hilarious the way they did that. That they actually were like, let's just take some fencing, you know, history, and they'll just say it. Jargon. But like it's a little weird because it's like I guess I guess that's true. I guess it's jargon, but it's like, you know, these are just fencing masters. They're just saying like you've studied your, you know, your Shakespeare. But I find that, you know, Chaucer counters Shakespeare rather well, doesn't he? Your other main example of your opinion of movie better than book is Last Unicorn. Another one where I have definitely seen the movie but not read the book. So, we finished Magician's Gambit, and need to figure out what to read next. We have 2 books left in this series. Robot Q and Izzy have been reading Last Unicorn. Oh, cool. You've never read it before. Yeah, I've never read it. Parts of that movie are just so sad. So sad. Are you enjoying reading it so far? How far into it are you? Movie's been one of Mrs.'s favorites since she was about 4. I definitely saw it when I was very young. I don't know how much I understood it at that time. And then I've watched it, you know, a few times since then. Pretty early in. Izzy remembered some scenes being lifted right from the book. That's always interesting, right? Bebab cannot watch that movie for that reason. Too sad, yeah. Ugh. Yeah, a few of the lines in that. We're going to watch the movie again after finishing it. Good call. The author was involved in the screenplay. That's nice. What's the line? Be wary of rousing a wizard's wrath. Rousing a wizard's... Be wary of making a magician angry. That's one of my favorite lines. Rary of rousing a wizard's wrath. So, I don't want to decide tonight, but does anyone have any suggestions for what we should read next? Or the whole butterfly bit? I will have a selection of books for us to choose from on Friday. Molly Grew is your role model for having a fantasy adventure in middle age. It is always nice when the protagonists in a story are not, teenagers. That's one of the nice things I think about the Discworld books, is that, quite frequently it's grown adults into, their middle age, or even a little on the elderly side in some cases. Farmos is suggesting some books. Yeah, so before you forget, if I need someone to be said. Oh, I'm assuming you mean sad. Oh, to raid. If I need someone to raid, the Anchored Albatross is wood burning a Marauders map. Sure, we could definitely do that. What do you think, Bebab? Do you have any suggestions for what I should put on the list of books to read next to vote for? No, I'm pretty sure we must have the next books of the Belgariad out. Because we'll take a vote on Friday. Usually I like to, so far I've only read books that I have read before, just, so that I'm familiar with them myself. So we could read, the next book in this series is going to be Castle of Wizardry. I'm sure we'll get to that at some point, whether it's the next one we read or if we take a break. We could read another Terry Pratchett book. Farmo suggested another couple there, which one of those is the next book in the Guard series, which we've left behind for a bit. Or another Witches book. Or we could do an unrelated one. We could go with something a little older, maybe like Three Musketeers. I'm not sure how long that would take to read. We wouldn't even necessarily need to read the entirety of it, because I think it's kind of broken up into sections. I would need to find a copy of that, if that's what we wanted to do. Bebab is always game for more Terry. Yeah, that's fair. Well, like I said, we'll take a vote on Friday. But these are all just, some options. And if anybody else wants to suggest anything, I would be happy to consider adding things to the list. Three Musketeers would be neat. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Foremost knows Man in the Iron Mask is unpacked, but you don't know about Three Musketeers. Well, we could definitely find a copy, whether we have one or if I need to stop by a bookstore or something. Sarky's leaning towards continuing one of the series we've started, so might be intrigued by a standalone classic by Three Musketeers. All right, I'll add that to the voting options for Friday. Yeah, but I will start up a raid for... We have tons of copies of the Modern Play. Yes, we do. Let's see, raid. It was the Anchored Albatross. Get that going. So, if you want to see some wood burning, which seems neat, tag along for that. But thank you again, everyone, for finishing yet another book with me. That's pretty exciting. It's nice to progress like that. And I am looking forward to getting to Castle of Wizardry. But I hope everybody has a good rest of the week. I'll be back here on Friday when we can figure out what we're going to read next. High five! All right. Have a good night, everybody. Oh, I hear a puppy. Oh, look at that puppy. See y'all on Friday. Join me for determining what we're going to read next and the beginning of a new book. Yay, starting something new. Okay. I'm starting the raid. Go say hi to the anchored albatross. Bye.